Quite honestly, it's easier to write a check in many cases than it is to spend your time. I think you owe it to the community where you are to give back.
Welcome back to Seasoned Chronicles. I'm your host, Cameron Mason. In this episode, we continue our conversation with Jay Ricker. In part one, we took a deep dive into Jay and his wife Nancy's impressive entrepreneurial journey. And now in part two, we're getting into the heart of his story. Things like balancing fatherhood while running a large organization, navigating the ins and outs of marriage while also being married to your business partner, and leveraging their business success for the greater good or for philanthropy. We'll also talk about the legacy that Jay and his wife Nancy are planning for and hope to leave behind. The Rickers have truly made the world a better place through their community involvement and the countless lives that they've touched. Let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about your philanthropic efforts, different organizations you've been involved in. Yeah, let's start there.
So I've talked about the trade association, which are really business entities.
Right.
But at the same time, Nancy and I both felt very strong that we needed to give back to the communities that we were in. And bear in mind, a lot of our stores in the original Rickers were here in Madison County. So first store we ever built from the ground up was in LaPel. They didn't even have a convenience store there. Then we built one and we took one over, remodeled Frankton, Elwood, Alexandria, Middletown, all these small towns. We wanted to give back, and so Nancy handled that with our daughter on the philanthropic part, especially as we got bigger. But we're also big believers in you give your time and your treasure. Mm-hmm. So it's between the two of us. I mentioned Nancy was on Habitat for Humanity's board. She was on Ivy Tech. We've also been big supporters of the Anderson campus of Ivy Tech. I sat on Community Hospital's board for probably 18 years in a stint of total 18 years, and chaired it twice. Nancy sits on Community Hospital's foundation for here in Anderson. I sit on Conner Prairie's board of directors, and I'm an emeritus member now, and that's been our biggest dollar-wise philanthropic entity that we've been with. In fact, we're in the process of helping them expand the museum substantially right now. And I'm probably going to forget half the organizations we're with. I sit on Anderson University's board of trustees as their vice chair right now. Neither Nancy or I are graduates from there. I'm a Purdue graduate, as I mentioned earlier. Quinn got his MBA there, and my son-in-law got his undergrad and his MBA there, but really didn't have a connection with. And I'm trying to think of what else I'm forgetting, because somebody will listen to this and they'll go, you forgot to mention something. But yeah, we've been with a lot of different organizations. We've been very active, although not on their board, at Alternatives over the years. We felt strongly about that. We actually instituted a program that came to us through Alternatives that was called Safe Haven, where if someone was in an abusive relationship, they could come to our store and have us call the police for them, and they get whisked away. Unfortunately, the lawyers at the succeeding company thought that they were at risk if they continued to do that and stopped doing it. But we rolled that program out any place we could, and I think it's the right thing to do.
The philanthropy didn't start when you sold the business. It started long before that.
Oh, yeah. We just had more dollars to give away afterwards, right, because we gave away some of the dollars we got out of the business.
What inspired you guys to give back all along the way and get involved and plugged into all these organizations?
That's a good question. I think where we grew up, our parents were involved in either church or local organizations. a little town I grew up near, Michigantown, Indiana, they had a community club that did things for the community. And it was like a town of 300 people. It was not a very large town. And these were farm families primarily who they got together and they had this once a year and they sold food. And it wasn't big, but they gave back to the community. My dad was a scoutmaster and a cub master. My mother was involved in when they had the sesquicentennial, I think. She was in a singing group that went around. So it wasn't just to raise money, it was just to be active. And so both of our parents were involved in things like that. So I think that set the tone. I think we just ramped it up. Mm-hmm. And we were in a much bigger urban setting versus where we grew up on farms.
It's inspiring to see that you had little or less. The business wasn't as successful. You were involved in giving back, and then you just allowed that to blossom along with your career. It's certainly been a part of you and Nancy's journey all along the way. Not everybody has that.
I think it just depends on the individual, too. We did a lot of things at stores to raise money, and I dressed as a clown who turned out to be our mascot, Pops the Clown. And we raised virtually all the money for a veteran who was severely handicapped to build a house for him. And there were other things that we raised money for particularly. And we used characters. Obviously, with that many stores, I didn't do it every place, but we had customer appreciation weeks when we gave things back to our customers, which wasn't philanthropic, but it was thanking the people that supported us. So yeah, I think you owe it to the community where you are to give back. And there were a lot of times where we were really, especially in some of these real small towns, we were the only really thriving business that was open 24 hours, that the police were at our stores a lot when they took their break. There was some project we did up in Frankton with the school for years. They were raising money for the band to go to some parade someplace, and we would get involved in helping them at that particular store to do things. But we wanted to give back to the communities we were in. That's why we still do that, primarily here in the Madison County area. The Paramount has been one we've been involved in, and while we weren't on the board, our daughter Lane is, but we paid off their mortgage after we sold the business and gave them a large donation here in the last year or two. We want to see things like that survive, and hopefully we set an example for other people, because sometimes we do matching. When we give our money away now, we'll give you this much, but you need to raise that much too, so we can amplify what we're giving.
What you've given to is pretty diverse.
Oh yeah, it's all over the board.
Yeah. Are there specific, as you guys move forward in life, are there specific areas that you're most interested in, or do you think it'll continue to be pretty diverse?
We started a donor advised foundation that we don't have to administer. And so we give money out of that. So it'll be around after we're gone. But we also are not we're not going to live forever. We're trying to do some things that down the road will help.
We touched on your family a little bit. Not every business owner has kids who are interested in working in the business. You know, some don't. I would love to learn more from your perspective, what that transition looked like. Unpack that a little bit, because I think that there's probably a lot of lessons in there.
We had a rule that if the kids wanted to be in the business, and I really picked this up from people I was around in NACS, who a lot of them were big companies, multi-generations, that you couldn't come to work for the company till you'd been on the outside 5 years. And most of them all went to college, then they had 5 years. And I told both the kids that. Quinn came back after 5 years. Lane was a very successful drug rep, and she made way more money than her brother in the job she was in, although she helped her mother with the philanthropic for years, and she still does that. So that's not always easy. I'd been there and started the business, and so there were things that I felt very strongly about. One of the things we got into this spat over was changing the logo. And I was like, the marketing firm we had said, oh, you really need to change the logo. It's outdated. And they want to take the fountain drink off of it. So, and they want to change the colors. We fussed over things like that in the scheme of things really weren't that big, but I think it was a control issue with me. And it was our son wanting to assert himself. So for the most part, we got along well on things. I was gone for almost a year while I was chairman of my trade association. I was out of town 110 days in 1 year. So obviously I couldn't run it and do all the others. So Quinn was running things. And then, I was ready to slow down on some of the things and just concentrate on boards and some of the things that were really important to me in the business.
You think being involved in the trade helped expedite that handoff for you and relinquish some of that control?
Yeah, I would say somewhat, because I had good role models. You're with a rolling group of people, but some of those people I was on that board with for 10, 12 years. And when we're having meetings, having dinner and a drink, stories come out, and over time you meet the families at different functions. Sheets, in particular, who runs a chain of about 600 stores in Pennsylvania, or in like 6 or 7 states. And then there's a chain called Quick Trip with a K up in La Crosse, who became good friends. And they were really good about sharing best practices. We're like a small chain, like a tenth their size. And they're sharing, they had custom-made software in some cases that they allowed us to use a lot of, and we toured their facilities. I think there's a lot of good business practices there. And plus, the workshops we had, I actually chaired the convention committee through the trade association for 12. I didn't chair it the whole time. I was on the committee for 12 years, and I chaired it for 3 or 4. So, we had all these workshops that we gave, and they weren't just on how to sell candy bars. It was how to do HR issues, environmental. They really dove down in the business, transitioning to the next generation. We had those kind of seminars all the time. And at these sessions, there'd be 300-400 people at maybe 15 sessions going on at the same time. There were a lot of people there. In fact, we had to shut the doors a lot of times because the fire marshal said you got too many people in the room. But and then that became more sophisticated. You could get them online. So yeah, the ability to hear what's the right way to do it. And they had a lot of outside experts. It wasn't just people in the industry. Although we Rickers gave seminars, we'd sometimes have 2 or 3 speakers at a show for maybe 5 or 6 years, which that's not an easy thing to do. These were sophisticated presentations. If you did not do the little sheet at the end would say, when they gave a quick summary, you had to be on your toes. The guy who was our marketing manager, Keith Broviak, he did them for years, and he still is in the industry. He went to work for somebody who was in a share group that we were in out in Pennsylvania, and he's still a close friend. And so he goes, I get to go to the convention now, but I don't have to speak.
How much credit do you give to surrounding yourself with the right people?
Oh, I think that was critical. We had a really good executive team. In fact, most of them I think there's 10, most of them were executives that have migrated and work for Quinn's company now. So his CEO, his CFO, his head of HR, there's a bunch of them that all work for him. Yeah, there's no question. I call them the Ricker Mafia at the new place.
And then external folks, some of these owners of other businesses in your peer group, it sounds like you leaned on them a lot for advice along the way.
I would say that. And some of the philanthropic people, that ran those organizations. Beth Tharp at Community Hospital, now John Pistol, they've got great life lessons and run big organizations. And in John's case, my gosh, he's done everything. Ran TSA and number 2 at the FBI. So you've got people that are in areas that I would never be in. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I think it's one of the reasons that we were successful was being involved in all these different groups. I would have never got to buy all the stores from Amoco and BP if it hadn't been for chairing the organization of their customers.
Yeah.
And so they knew me and they trusted me to sell those assets.
Working with different business owners and having been a part of starting a few companies, you learn pretty quick you can't do it alone.
No
And
way.
it sounds like you surrounded yourself with a lot of the right people, and that's very evident in your story. Talk a little more about the family dynamic. I don't agree with this. I just heard a quote, LeBron James, probably the greatest basketball player of the modern era, whether you like his antics sometimes or not. He was quoted as saying, I'm going to misquote it, but something along the lines of, to be great, your family has to suffer. And while I understood what he was saying, it really hurt. I've got a young family. I've got 2 little kids.
And how old are your kids?
Mac is 3 and May is 1.
You got lots ahead of you.
Yeah, I'm in the thick of it. But for me,
You're in
I want
diapers still.
One of them. One's potty trained, one's in diapers. We're cleaning up after the kids a lot, you could say. Part of the reason doing this podcast is to find individuals like yourself who have been great at their craft, whether that's business or sport or what have you, and have built a legacy that's worth learning from, whether that was maybe not all good, maybe there's some bad in there that we should take and consider. Your mattress story.
By the way, Nancy didn't want me to get involved in, but she really hasn't said I told you.
But it is an example of stay in your lane. You're doing well in this lane. You're learning to perfect it. Stick there. And I think it's okay to try things. And for you, it's a learning opportunity. And it sounds like it's part of your story. And you can, probably wasn't fun at the moment, but you can talk about it, laugh about it now. But,
No, we still don't talk about the mattress company much. I have a couple people that know it, and they'll go, "There's the mattress company."
it's a bad memory you don't want to relive. But with your family, obviously your son and your daughter both came back and got involved in the company. So they didn't hate Ricker Oil. They didn't hate the gas station.
No, and
but
I
I'm
think
sure
that happens sometimes.
Yeah, but I'm sure early on you worked long hours. You were busy. And yeah, I just want to know more about raising your kids and running the business. What are some things you felt like you did well as a dad? And is there something that stands out that, man, you wish you would have done better in terms of balancing both?
I think there's a lot of people that don't have a good balance. They're so devoted to their business, they do neglect their family. In our case, Nancy and I both worked in that business till the day we sold it. Mm-hmm. And her office was down the hall from mine, and I did my thing and she did her thing. And that probably helped our dynamics. When we were much smaller and the kids were much younger, we always had dinner together, unless I was out at a meeting someplace, but usually they weren't over dinner. And we'd talk about the business. And so they got to hear the good and the bad, because, I mean, there's challenges in any kind of business. There's challenges in life.
Right.
And so they heard all that. So I don't think, they didn't hear just the bad. They heard the good too.
Sure.
So I think they had a balanced view of that. Quinn was very successful in his career, as was Lane. And he could have stayed working there, but he didn't like working for a big corporation. And I hear that. I was just at lunch with somebody today who works for a big corporation. And he was talking about, and he's got a really good job. And so I mentor 2 or 3 guys. This guy, this is worth a little story. So I'm at a station, and he's filling up a pickup truck next to me. And I'm filling up the car I drive, which is a high-end car. And he said, "You really don't have anything you can drive better than that." So anyway, we got to chattering back and forth. And so we exchanged a few things, and I don't want to give more details on who he is.
That's fine, yeah.
So we, left at that. I mean, we didn't exchange numbers or anything. But about the next weekend, I got an email from this guy, and he said, "I'm looking for somebody to mentor me." He said, "Would you consider that?" So I said, "Yeah, let's meet for lunch." So we've been doing that for 2 years, and he works for a big company, and we just had lunch before we started this. And he said, it's a great company to work for, but it's just not what I want to do. And he's paid very well for what he does. And I said, well, you just got to make up your mind. He wants to be an entrepreneur. A lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs. But and I'm having a book written for our grandkids about what all happened to get us where we are. Our grandkids are 16 to 12, all boys except for the youngest is a girl. And so our life is not like, their life is not like our life was, as we were raised on farms. Our business was getting big, but it wasn't that big. When they've come along, they've had the ability to do a lot of things that even our kids didn't.
Sure.
And so you don't want to have kids or grandchildren that are entitled. And so we are constantly saying, you need to work hard at what you do. You need to, be respectful. So I think that's one of the tougher things, is to make sure the next understands you got to work hard to get where you are today. So that as they get older, they're getting jobs. I think that's important. And they're respectful. They're still kids, and they do things that are all kids do. But I think to set an example with them. We just came back from spring break being with two of our grandkids, and you try and give them life lessons when you're with them. Although all of our grandkids live within 10 minutes of the house here, so we see them all.
I've heard so many stories of, and I don't know what it is, but of folks' parents who are bitter or turned off the idea that their kids have done better than them or are financially in a different position than they were at that age. I've heard stories of this, and I'm like, man, I hope my son and my daughter, I hope they're light years ahead of where I was when.
I don't have any problem with that. And
I don't either.
My son's business could be like that too,
right?
Potentially. No, and that was never a problem with our parents.
Sure.
Both of them, they were just, in fact, my mother's the only living parent now. And I'm sure that, and she's at a long-term care facility. And I'm sure she bores them to death about us. No, our parents were I don't think they didn't realize the size of the business. I think it was hard for them to comprehend.
Sure.
The things that we were able to do, the people we met. When I was chair of the NACS, I got to introduce Bill Clinton and do a Q&A with him. I got to do some extraordinary things. There's a picture hanging someplace, and our son saw it, and we were at an event where both Bush and Clinton were there. And they do one of those where they take pictures of everybody. And so there was a picture of the four of us. And Quinn goes, man, those are really good wax representations of the two presidents. And I said, Quinn, that's them. He goes, really? You got to pinch yourself sometimes when you get to do things like that. Now, cool. Back to Earth that picture was taken about 2 months after I'd introduced Clinton in front of a few thousand people and did a Q&A with him. And Nancy goes, oh, he'll remember you from that. I said, he ain't going to remember me. He didn't remember me. I thought, no, he's not going to. He was very pleasant. People told me, because I just happened to be the right place, the right time, to be the one that got to introduce whoever our speaker was. And I was the incoming chairman, so that's how I got to do it. And they said, you will be impressed because you'll think you're the only person in the room. And he was like that too. He was very attuned to people. And of course, we all know about all the things that Clinton has or hasn't done. But no, he was just like the two of us were up there talking.
You're let's call it an oil man for your career.
True.
In your life. Do you have an electric car?
No. I do think a hybrid is potentially the way to go.
Okay.
But there's not enough infrastructure out there to handle all electric. I also chaired the Fuels Institute for this country and was on its board for some time. In fact, I helped get it started. And so I drove a hydrogen vehicle, which I think is probably the best and the smartest, but there's just no way to have hydrogen every place. But I think a hybrid is good for any place. If the charge goes out, and we know after this cold winter that some people had some issues, then you've got a backup fuel that'll keep you going. That makes the most sense to me. And I'm not saying I wouldn't get one of those, but I wouldn't get a totally electric vehicle at this point.
You're quoted. You said, I think there's going to be a cocktail of different fuels depending on where you are and depending on the infrastructure.
So I haven't changed my mind. Okay.
Just curious.
That's good.
Yeah. This was written, I think, in 2018 or 19 when you sold the business, but I was curious on my way over here. I thought, I wonder what their perspective is on electric vehicles and if they've dabbled, but yeah, that's interesting.
I've got some friends who are in the same business, and some of them have got all electric cars, and I'm like, my friend down in Savannah, Greg Parker, and he's got an all-electric vehicle. I'm thinking, oh, I don't think I could do that.
It's a little bit like selling your soul to the devil.
Yeah. And he's a very successful operator and very philanthropic too.
Looking back at your career in your life, is there anything? Yeah, I'm not. You may not. You probably aren't someone that lives with a lot of regret. But is there anything you would have done different?
I wouldn't have bought the mattress factory. It cost me a lot of money.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it cost me a lot of sweat and toil. My wife wasn't very happy with me because we did this, and I don't blame her. But you know what they say, hindsight's 20/20. I think, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. There's other things I've been involved in too. I had a tank testing business. There were a lot of things. We had a bakery, but they were all somewhat adjacent to the key business that we had. I think at our size, and for most people who are entrepreneurs, you need to stick to your lane. Now, there's been people like, well, look at Tesla, look at Musk. He's got all kinds of things. But for the average person who's an entrepreneur, I think you need to stay in your lane or adjacencies to it.
And another article you're quoted as saying, or paraphrase, stay in your core business or something that's directly related to it.
I'm glad I'm being consistent.
I think it's powerful, and I don't know if that's being in a service business more true than being in a technology business, or it may be industry specific, but there's something to that focus and being deliberate about what you're going after.
I don't think you can be an expert in everything. Stick to the area. Environmental company cleaned up underground tank spills. And one of the main reasons it wasn't to really make money, although it's been very successful for us financially, and it's like almost 30 years later now, is that I had peace of mind that everything was being done properly. The last thing I want to do is get a call in the middle of the night, especially when we ran tankers, and hear that we had a tanker roll over and polluted a major interchange in Indianapolis. The first thing I would do is call this guy, and we took care of incidents just like that for people.
What advice would you give a younger person, either getting started in their career or thinking about starting a business, maybe raising a family? You've given a lot of wisdom here, but what advice would you give?
Might be 2 or 3 pieces. I think a mentor for anybody who's in business is good. I think finding one is not so easy. Like the serendipitous way that I got the one guy I do. And I've got 2 or 3 guys like that I do. One of them, he's the guy writing my book. I've turned into a second father for him in many respects. I think it's important if you can find the right person. Maybe it's through your church, maybe it's there's all kinds of different avenues.
Sure.
I don't think finding somebody at the local convenience store is going to be how most of them do it, but
yeah.
And I think you can't lose focus on your marriage and your children whether you're working for a big company or whether you're running your own business. I think everybody expects times when you're really busy, but you just can't do that all the time or it's going to suffer. And I never felt like our family suffered from the business because Nancy's part of the business. It was 50-50. And the kids saw us in a positive way and saw the business in a positive way. We had them work. Quinn mowed grass, cleaned the warehouse. Lane cashiered at the store. Quinn managed the store one summer, and it was a store here in Pendleton. And if the phone rang after 10 o'clock for him, he knew somebody wasn't going to show up for third shift, because he said he did not want to hear the phone ring after that time. And he had to go in and work third shift sometime too. So it was a good learning experience for him. People sometimes take for granted the people that are at the entry level or at the store level. And gosh, they were our customers in my mind. We had customers, but then we had internal customers. And somebody would be asking for some bit of information from all the stores. They're busy running the store. You come second at the office. They're the ones that are out there. Don't be peppering them with things that we finally got it where they could group all their questions together and ask once a week if they needed bits of information. So I don't know how much wisdom that is, but from my perspective, your family, church, that's very important to a lot of people, as it should be. I've gotten a little closer by being involved at AU, which is a third of our board is pastors. It's a direction in religion, and I grew up in the Methodist Church, and we've been Church of God members. We've been real active in churches here, so I think that depending on the individual, I think that's important in the life too.
We were having a book written from the farms of Clinton County, Indiana to now.
We're trying to come up with a name. I've got a name. And my wife hates it. I said, 2 farm kids who made well. She goes, I hate that name. I don't know what we're going to call it.
Maybe Don't Buy a Mattress Company.
I don't think I'd like that.
But you're having a book written from the early years to now. You're giving it to your grandkids. What are the last few chapters going to look like that aren't written yet? What do you want? What do you and Nancy want?
I've been working on this for 2 years.
Okay.
So we thought it'd be done sooner. So I think it's a blueprint for how to live their lives and to understand where we came from. My grandkids aren't going to have to worry financially about things.
Sure.
They don't know that, but they're not the average kids. We take them on vacations. We have a home in Florida. They get to do things that most people don't. And we tell them, most people don't get to do this. And you shouldn't be braggadocio about anything either. But we also share our things that we have too. And I think they see that. We take friends with us. We have friends there. We do things for, Nancy's got a group of cousins that we've all got together over the years. She's the oldest of 16 of them, I think. And we share things with them.
Yeah.
And I have no cousins, and my only sibling died a few years ago. Her cousins are like my cousins.
You've sent employees places and put them on planes and put them on trips and put them up in places, and I think that's just who you guys are, and it's a testament to your personality and the way you give back. But what I meant by that question is you and Nancy are still here, and you, good Lord willing, still have several years left.
We hope.
And what are you guys going to do with those years?
Travel. Yeah, we actually started traveling, and we hadn't because of some issues.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we got a list of places we want to go. We want to go to Chile. We want to go to Argentina. Somebody asked me just the other day, and I'm going to put it in the book. They said, how many countries have you been to? And I was like, I've never been asked that question. So then I started counting them all. So, yeah, I think I'll have Nick put that in the book.
Jay, I appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about your story and where you've been, what you've done. And I know it's not all of it, but I think there's some valuable lessons in there, and appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
That's a wrap on part 2 of Jay Ricker's story. Again, I'd like to thank Jay for coming on, having a conversation, and sharing his entrepreneurial journey. Can't thank them enough. I would really appreciate it if you'd share the podcast with your friends, your network, with your family. Please like the podcast on Spotify or on YouTube. Give us 5 stars. That'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you for tuning in.